Hello Helpdesk. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Bunty and I'm the head of Dayforce at Silver Cloud. Today, I'm excited to share my experience and answer your questions on how the onboarding module can enhance your Dayforce solution. Joining me in this webinar is my colleague Vicky Leon. Before I pass on to Vicky, thank you for joining us. And we apologize for the delayed start of the webinar. Thank you for your patience, and we are excited to begin. Over to you, Vicky.
Thank you, Bunty. Hello, Helpdesk. I am one of the certified talent module experts here at Silver Cloud with 8 years of Dayforce-focused experience. Before we begin, a quick reminder that everyone should be aware the webinar is being recorded. As Bunty mentioned, today's Hello Helpdesk session will be focused more on Dayforce onboarding. Should you have other questions related to other modules or other Dayforce topics, there will be time for Q&A toward the end of the session. So submit your questions through the Zoom chat, and we'll be monitoring those questions throughout the session today. And thanks again for your patience with our technical difficulties. Let's begin.
Thank you, Vicky. I look forward to an engaging session with you. So let us start with a quick audience poll to assess what stage of the Dayforce onboarding journey you're currently on. You should see a question pop up on your screen. Okay, so Vicky, just give it a few seconds. We'll wait for the results to come in. All right, so we can see that the responses are evenly distributed from the members of our audience today. So Vicky, in this case, let us break down the onboarding module functionality at a high level for those who are not familiar.
Sure. So the onboarding module is one of the many talent modules included in your Dayforce offering. So some customers may already be familiar with other talent modules, for example, the learning module, performance management, engagement, and compensation management. So having myself worked in HR before, we sometimes refer to onboarding as the time frame between an offer is accepted by the new joiner through to the first 90 or so days of employment. But keep in mind when we're referring to onboarding during this Hello Helpdesk session, we are referring to the system module and in particular how to better enhance the system processes. We're not specifically relating to a comprehensive onboarding journey, though we can certainly find ways to maximize the Dayforce onboarding module to enhance your overall new starter journey. The goal is to engage your new joiners through the system, ensure that they're well informed and prepared for their new roles. So from a Dayforce system perspective, employee records do need to be created first in core HCM and self-service, which then triggers what we call the first time access email with the Dayforce activation link, which is emailed to your new starters. Then the new joiners can access the Dayforce onboarding portal before their start date. There they can complete payroll forms, read brief introductions about colleagues that they'll be working with, and also download additional helpful materials shared by the company.
Thank you, Vicky. That was really insightful. Um, yeah,
Bunty,
no.
after having outlined the onboarding main functionalities, as our poll question asked and the results came in, some of our audience members are still embarking on the initial stages of their Dayforce project and maybe contemplating whether they want to include onboarding during phase 1 or later stages of their implementation. From your experience, what are some factors that they should consider when deciding?
Okay. The first factor would be project scope. Definitely, if you're including onboarding module in phase 1, that can increase the complexity and scope of the project. So we need to make sure we do a proper assessment whether the project team has the capacity to handle the additional load. Second thing is about resource availability. So definitely make sure that if you have the resource, they are able to support the onboarding module concurrently with core WFM or payroll.
So you've covered scope and resources. What about from a stakeholder management lens? Are there any strategic business priorities or goals that should be considered?
So if onboarding is a high priority for the business, it might be beneficial to include it in phase one. And second thing, which is very important, we need to consider the impact of delaying onboarding module. If a streamlined onboarding process can significantly improve the new hire process, it may warrant an earlier implementation.
Great. And so placing my HR hat on again, walk us through some of the change management considerations that might impact the business leaders and employees.
Okay. So first one would be user adoption. So I'll explain what. Implementing too many modules at a time can be overwhelming for end users. So once you've done your org readiness for change and you have assessed properly that you can train and support end users across multiple modules, then that can be a basis for a decision. Second thing, if you're thinking of using a phase approach, that would allow for more focused training, better user adoption, and also it can improve, the training and adaptation for the end users to using the onboarding module.
And placing your own PM hat on, what else is there to consider?
Okay, definitely. My first answer will be project timeline. So do an assessment of your project timeline, including onboarding in phase one. Can that extend the timeline or deferring it in phase two? Could that provide more manageable phases? My second point would be about cost implication. So determine the budget implication of including onboarding in phase one versus phase two. Earlier inclusion might require additional investment in resources and time. So these are two main factors from a project management perspective that you may want to consider when making a decision.
Thanks, Bunty. That was insightful. Keep in mind, audience members, that there are quite a few dependencies between your core HCM and the talent modules themselves. So, for example, your organization's structure, the management hierarchy, any existing Dayforce roles that you've created, including the features, forms and workflows as well. So customers should be aware of this before kicking off their onboarding implementation.
So now on to some more interesting topic, Vicky. So some of my customers, they're currently utilizing a non-Dayforce ATS for recruiting, and they intend to stick with the non-Dayforce platform for the ATS. Can you explain to the member of audience how does that impact the Dayforce onboarding implementation?
So you are correct, Bunty. We have encountered some businesses who wish to move forward with Dayforce onboarding, but not the recruiting module. From a project timeline perspective, there's little impact as onboarding configuration is completed in roughly, say, 10 to 12 weeks. It can be accomplished as an add-on to the core HCM or your WFM implementation, or it can be handled completely separate as a standalone module when it comes to implementation. The Dayforce talent guided approach is a well-established process, and it will enable the customer to go live with onboarding at whatever date that they're comfortable with. The biggest impact, I will say, will likely be from an internal people operations standpoint, because the customers will need to confirm how the new hire information will be extracted from the external ATS for those new hires, and how it will be entered into Dayforce to trigger the rest of the new hire processes. So we do highly recommend for customers to actively revise their processes between their external ATS platform and Dayforce. In other words, you do need to look at what your current as-is process is, and then continue to adapt those processes as you move forward with your onboarding implementation to what we call the to-be process once you are more familiar with the Dayforce features offered.
Okay. You've just referred to guided approach. Please explain to me and to our audience member What is the difference between a talent-guided approach and a standard Dayforce methodology?
So implementing the Dayforce talent modules is different from the process for core payroll or time and attendance. Talent modules usually involve a more hands-on approach, and it does require active ongoing maintenance more than some of the core modules themselves. So the customer's Dayforce administrators really need to understand how to monitor the effectiveness of their talent configuration. And as business needs continually change, these Dayforce administrators are also responsible for modifying all of the talent configurations going forward. So through the Dayforce guided implementation process, a dedicated Dayforce consultant will pair up with the customer's project team. There are specific topics and sessions outlined well in advance in regards to the talent implementation plan. During these one-to-one sessions with the Dayforce consultants, we meet with the customer's HR admin team to provide guidance, best practices, to make sure that the customer has a full understanding of the module's features and configuration steps.
And what happens after each guided sessions?
So following the sessions, customers, in terms of the HR admin teams, are assigned activities. I try not to refer to them as homework, but essentially they are activities that the customers do need to complete following the session. So this can be Dayforce Learning Center training to prepare for the next session topic. The customers will be assigned actual configuration that they themselves will be completing in a pre-production environment. And of course, lots and lots of testing through day-in-the-life scenarios and test cases. So this approach is, as you can tell, quite hands-on. It emphasizes measurable results. We usually break the module down into smaller pieces and make sure that the testing is done on each component. At the end, the result we're looking for is for a customer to be fully confident in their ability to set up and maintain the talent module on their own going forward. So after we conclude the weekly sessions together, the customers will be well equipped to maintain the system going forward, and they can also train the other trainers across their business.
This is actually in an innovative way of implementing. I had excellent feedback about it from my customers. Thank you, Vicky.
So, Bunty, if customers are interested in onboarding as an add-on to tie in with their Dayforce services currently, what would you suggest as their next steps that they should take?
So I call it a three-step approach. Step number one, reach out to Silver Cloud and it will be your Dayforce CSM. The second step is Silver Cloud, in collaboration with Dayforce, will conduct a demo session for you. The purpose of the demo session is for you to see the system. Second, understand your current pain point of your onboarding process, and obviously determine if Dayforce would be a suitable solution. And step number three, Silver Cloud will provide an implementation proposal outlining the scope, the timeline, and the cost. Bear in mind, it will be a high-level timeline. As you sign the contract, you would be getting a detailed project timeline. Second thing, Dayforce would share the impact on the PEPM, which is the per employee per month cost, outline any changes to the subscription charges based on the addition of the onboarding module. By taking these steps, we can ensure clarity for our customers to make an informed decision on whether to use Dayforce onboarding.
Thanks for outlining the process, Bunty. Just a heads up to any audience members, if you would like to reach out to Silver Cloud, we do have an email inbox that you can send your inquiries to. It's info@silvercloudhr.co.uk, info@silvercloudhr.co.uk, or you can contact us through the LinkedIn messaging area or our company website at www.silvercloudhr.co.uk. But various avenues that our audience members can reach out to us.
So Vicky, now I'd like to move on to more technical questions. From your experience, what are some system automations to help Dayforce admin reduce the manual work during the new starter journey.
Yes, Bunty. So now we're moving on to the more, as some would call it, exciting part of the Hello Help Desk session. So there are many ways to optimize Dayforce within, core HCM and self-service in conjunction with onboarding for automation. So I will be sharing my screen very shortly, but throughout the one-to-one onboarding guided sessions, we do cover in depth all of the onboarding setup functionality on how to create your onboarding policy, attach new hire forms, go through a workflow if needed for these forms. But this next part of our Hello Help Desk session today, I will be just sharing some additional insight on how to maximize your system through more of a holistic approach instead of focusing on just one module implementation as a silo. As many of our participants know, Dayforce has multiple dependencies between core, WFM, payroll, and of course the talent modules. And the system is a single source application. So you really want to maximize many of those existing processes and standard features available in order to streamline a number of system processes. So bear with me one moment as I share my screen.
I can see it.
Great. Thanks for confirming, Bunty. So let's start with one of the first areas that really drive a number of system processes. Some admins are familiar with what we call the employee data mapping rules. So here we have a login to our sample company here. On the left-hand navigational menu, we're accessing the HR admin and the employee data mapping rules. So on the left-hand side, you'll notice down below we have 3 rules created. Essentially, these rules will apply these settings to new joiners anytime they've been entered into the system. So for this UK new hire entry, you can see we are applying these policies to the employee record based on specific qualifiers. So in this scenario, we have a job, which is an administrator, hired into the pay group of the UK monthly. If we have a new joiner with these qualifiers entered into Dayforce, these mapping rules will apply. So the system will automatically apply this appropriate pay class, the pay policies, and relevant employee settings. Why I want to bring this up during today's Hello Help Desk session is that you'll notice at the bottom here, we've created a employee data mapping rule specifically for your onboarding policy. So when a new joiner is entered into Dayforce, we will assign this new hire UK onboarding policy, and the system will automatically assign this Dayforce role of the onboarding UK role. And that way your new joiner will be able to access the getting started area in relation to their onboarding policy forms. You'll notice as well, we've created a qualifier for those values. So any new starters that are hired into the UK pay group, and as well, any new joiners that are entered in the system with a pre-start status will then automatically be assigned this onboarding policy and role. So the employee data mapping rules are a really great way to automate assignment of relevant policies across your system. And like I said, it doesn't just apply to onboarding policies, but it is sometimes overlooked through the implementation process. Another area I do want to point out here is the importance of the union qualifier. So just very quickly, I will navigate to this new hire entry frontline mapping rule. And you'll notice down below, I've added a union membership value. So I know some organizations don't have unions, but I would highly suggest looking at repurposing the union value under the HR admin as a way to categorize some of your new joiners. The reason this is very important for onboarding is that when we look at the onboarding forms, and I'm just popping over to a different area now of the system under workflow admin. and our guided process forms. I have an example here where we have some policies for new joiners, specifically for the UK. You'll notice under this package of forms, we have 4 policies that we would like new joiners to sign off on. But you'll notice in the middle here, we have a union eligibility qualifier. So what this means is that if you do create a number of different policies that only apply to specific groups of employees, you can use the union as a way to categorize some of your new joiners. So in this instance, all the UK employees will be required to access the onboarding policy itself. They can review the policies that they need to sign off on. But for those employees that are assigned the frontline union, they will need to sign off on this policy. Whereas for the sales union, these new joiners will be able to sign off on this policy here. So it's another way for you to categorize your new joiners and make sure that the relevant policies or forms are enabled for that particular new joiner.
Thank you for the tips. I would like to add that some customers may have inherited their employee data mapping from the initial WFM setup, or may have forgotten to maintain the data mapping since go live. For those who need a bit of a refresher on how to configure employee data mapping in its entirety, you may go on Dayforce implementation guide for a step-by-step instructions. So it's good to point out that data mapping is often an overlooked component, but it plays a significant part in reducing the manual administration for managers and administrators. And thank you so much for showing us your tips in building the employees mapping. Now, Vicky, I would like to see the first time access email attachment area. This is something that is often asked and we get tons of questions about it. So if you can just walk us through a little bit and explain to us about this, please.
Yes, so under the onboarding setup, you would configure the first time access email configuration. We sometimes refer to this as the FTAE acronym. So if you hear that a lot, it's referring to this email that is sent out to new joiners, inviting them to activate their Dayforce account. So under this example, we've created a new template for 2024. And you can see that we've configured the wording of this template down below. I'll just select on the preview screen so you can see what this email looks like. So the top part explains a bit about an introduction to what Dayforce is about, how the company uses Dayforce, and why it's important for this new joiner to activate their account. So the area I want to direct your attention to is down below. You see that we've added a document called Instructions for Dayforce Mobile App Access, which will then be delivered to the new joiner through this first time access email. So we do recommend customers taking a look at their current processes for FTAE. And if there are any frequent questions that HR teams receive during their onboarding process, they can certainly draft maybe a 1 or 2 page document and attach it as part of their FTA attachments so that this information is delivered directly to the new starter even before they activate their Dayforce account. So some other examples I've seen beyond instructions for the downloading Dayforce mobile app could be additional details about the onboarding process. If there's any navigational pointers, once logged into Dayforce, you can create as well a how-to guide for that and attach it as part of your first time access email attachment. So when I exit out of the preview and scroll down to the actual configuration component, you can see that there's an area for attachments down below. And this is where you can add a document, and this would then be sent out to your new joiners as part of a first time access email.
It's very interesting. Can you also tell us about some general troubleshooting tips when it comes to first-time access email?
Yeah, from my experience, especially on being part of an implementation on the client side, sometimes I received emails and issues from new joiners mentioning that they never received this first-time access email. So the first thing I always suggest is just check your junk and spam folder. Sometimes new joiners didn't realize that this email was sent to their junk. And then once they retrieve the email, they'll be able to access the Dayforce activation link and any of the attachments that you have provided as part of your first-time access email attachments. Another thing to make note of is for those that have configured their own sender email address. So on this page here, you can see that Eco Global has a custom email that this first-time access email is being sent from. Just to make sure that if this email address has changed or there's any adjustments to on the IT side, customers should connect with your IT team to make sure that their domain setup is correct. So I'm just hovering my mouse over this little blue eye information icon, but it does provide a bit of a reminder that if your sender email address is changing or there's an issue with that, try and contact your internal IT team to see if there's an issue related to your domain name system.
Very interesting indeed. So I do have some more questions. Since you're already presenting, so perhaps I will be asking you some questions. So thinking about the often asked question by our customers, and one of the first questions they would say, "Oh, we have a lot of paper forms these days, and using Dayforce, we want to eliminate that." So what would be your recommendation, Vicky, to our customers and our audience members today?
Yeah, so this forms a large part of your onboarding guided process is to identify which system forms that you would like new joiners to fill out. So some common ones would be completing a emergency contact or their next of kin form, validating their personal address form, and some other existing standard Dayforce forms. However, we would highly recommend to look at building your own forms through the workflow administration area and form builder. Now, I know it seems daunting at first, and it's quite common for customers to only look at the standard forms that are already built in the system. But in this scenario, once the page loads, we have created a DEI collection form just as an example. So this is a custom form that I briefly created. And in this example, as a new joiner, we may collect this information through the onboarding policy itself. So what we've done is to create a XML form down below. And then when I select preview, you can get an idea of some of the custom information that we will collect from the new joiner. For example, we ask for their consent in order to collect this diversity information. So the new joiner would select on this box and then proceed to answer the rest of the questions. So
Really
even
interesting.
Yes, there are a number of other paper forms that I've encountered just again through working within HR for a long time. Other forms could be, say, the HMRC new starter form as well. So if new joiners need to upload their P45 from a former employer, you can build that into a custom form, which then automates and eliminates a lot of these paper submissions that you might receive. Another example of a form could be, say, an expression of wish form or a beneficiary designation form. So the options are endless in terms of creating custom forms in this workflow admin and form builder area.
So Vicky, let's say I'm not familiar with XML, and I would love to learn how to build a form on my own and be independent, as you say. What resources are available for me to be able to learn how to use XML and build a form?
It's a good question, Bunty. I was definitely in those shoes when I was first learning how to build a form. I would recommend to those audience members to take a look at the Dayforce Learning Center course called, I think it's called Modifying and modifying, creating, and configuring XML forms. It is a course that is hosted by Dayforce instructors themselves. It's about a 3 or 4 hour course, but at the end of that course, the learners will be able to learn the basics of how to put together an XML form using employee properties from the system and other ways of setting up that code. So it might seem intimidating and daunting at first, but from my personal experience, after I took that course through the Dayforce Learning Center, I felt a lot more comfortable in building forms and even creating simple drop downs. Everything was seamlessly integrated, and I was able to then issue this new form through the onboarding policy so that my new joiners were able to complete the form.
I will definitely have a look at that after the webinar today. Thank you, Vicky. Now, talk to me a bit about the HR policy reporting. That's an area which is really interesting, and I'd like to know more about it.
Yeah, so during the guided implementation process for onboarding, it's very typical that some organizations would ask for new joiners to acknowledge or download one of your company policies and make sure that they've understood the expectations. So from an HR admin standpoint, sometimes it's tedious to navigate to each individual new joiner. So I'm just showing you the onboarding employees area here. So if I'm an HR admin and I would like to assess, whether or not my new joiners have actually acknowledged all of the HR policies we've signed to them, it would require sometimes just clicking onto the onboarding employee, checking the task list and checking the forms and whether or not the policies have been completed. There is a quicker way to do this and which is to generate an actual report. So there is a Dayforce standard report. I'm now popping into the reporting area. Data and analytics. Reporting and analytics. And if we go to our reports, there is a standard report called the HR policies acknowledgement not signed off. So if I just do a quick search here for policy, you can see down below, there are some standard reports for policy acknowledgements not signed off. So as an HR admin, I may want to consider scheduling this report so that it's delivered to me daily or potentially weekly, and it consolidates all of the new joiners that have not yet signed off on the policies assigned to them. This is a really quick way as an admin just to potentially follow up with all these new joiners or prompt the manager to follow up with the new joiner that hasn't signed off on the policy. So I would suggest utilizing the standard Dayforce report as a way to automate some of these manual processes.
So, Vicky, I'm just to be honest with you, I'm someone who usually forget about important tasks. So can Dayforce help me to remind me if I do have upcoming tasks that are important? Is there a feature in Dayforce for that?
Yes, so you can see on the screen here, there are some reports related to onboarding tasks. So following that logic, you can schedule a report for incomplete onboarding tasks. So myself as an administrator can then look into the report. But the other way to deliver these reminders without a report would be to set up your system notifications. So in conjunction with the onboarding tasks that will be configured during the implementation process, just a reminder to our audience members, again, to take a look at the system admin area and your system notifications. Similar to the employee data mapping rules, sometimes admins tend to forget to kind of maintain the setup after go live, or it might be outdated, or they're not sure the relevant configuration that should apply. So if you would like some reminders and prompt of incomplete onboarding activities, take a look at some of the system notifications here. You can configure some of the these reminders, for example, of the onboarding completion to the administrators, or if you have managers that should be a little bit more involved with their new starter journey, you can subscribe manager roles to this system reminder. And you can set up the background job so that the system notifications run, say, on a daily basis and remind specific managers that their new joiner still has onboarding tasks to complete, or they may have incomplete activities still on their own. So I would suggest for, oh, go ahead, Bunty.
No, I love the way the screen is. Like you can subscribe role, then you can exclude users.
It's very
Like this.
helpful across
Yeah.
other areas, not just onboarding. So when we say a holistic view of your entire system, quite often if you're going through that guided implementation process, you're only looking at things to do with onboarding, things to do with new joiners. But you can see on the screen there are a number of other system notifications that may be overlooked related to HR, development plans, performance, and down below there are a number of WFM standard reminders. So you haven't looked at your system notifications recently, I would highly suggest those admins on the call just to pop in, take a look and see what reminders they can use that are available from the system itself.
Okay, all right. That's really useful. Thank you so much for the demo, Vicky. I do have another question for you. So, if a customer would like to integrate Dayforce so that the new hire information and employee record is populated from the external ATS, what would the process look like?
It's a great question, Bunty. I've stopped sharing since we won't be demoing that process now, but it's very typical for customers to create an export report from their external ATS. And that this report would encompass all the details regarding the new hire's job assignment, any salary that was offered, any details that need to be transitioned from the external ATS into Dayforce. So with this export report, the Dayforce admin can then re-import all this information into the Dayforce system to create those employee records and then initiate the onboarding policy and the first time access email.
Okay. Exports and reports, just saying that it might seem the old way of doing things. I do think that there's still a level of manual work involved in using exports and reports and the method that you've just described. Tell me a more efficient and smart way to achieve this.
It's a good point, Bunty. So if we're trying to automate a number of processes, a manual download of an export report and then sharing this, importing this information back into Dayforce might not be the most efficient solution. And there is a degree of potential errors there. So there is a new offering from Dayforce called the Integration Studio, where customers can create and manage and monitor integrations between Dayforce and other systems. Utilizing Integration Studio, customers can then send data between Dayforce and external applications seamlessly through inbound and outbound integrations. So it will remove that manual step of somebody extracting that report from the external ATS and then importing it into Dayforce. The data between the systems can be synced daily or whatever frequency that the customer prefers. And it really removes that need for a manual export process.
Thank you so much. I haven't thought about that. So what about the scenario then where a customer would like to integrate Dayforce with other downstream system after the new hire or new joiner has completed their onboarding forms?
Again, you can utilize the Dayforce Integration Studio to connect data with other external systems. Of course, with the expertise of our Silver Cloud technical team, we can certainly support customers with this build and set up the framework so that the mapping values are correct between the systems.
Could you then give us an example of this integration with an end-to-end solution?
Yeah, so just think for a second with the perspective of a new joiner and an HR admin. thinking about our demo just now, let's say that as a company and as an HR admin, I've created a custom form called an IT asset request form. And we require desk-based new hires to fill in this form during their onboarding. So this form will be available for them through Dayforce. The new joiner can then select their preference, say, for a laptop. For example, let's just say our new hire, Bill. He's a new joiner. He logs into his Dayforce onboarding portal. He gets a form asking him if he prefers a MacBook or a Windows laptop as part of their technology kit. So Bill then selects, of course, he prefers a Windows laptop, and then maybe another new joiner, his name is Steve, he prefers a MacBook. So you've automated at least that preference through the onboarding form itself. Okay, now let's move on. Bill says, I'm submitting the form along with my other payroll forms. I've uploaded my P45 as well through the onboarding portal. I've acknowledged all of my HR policies. What happens then? So through the integration, all of the submitted Dayforce form information and other aspects of Bill's employee record, for example, his job assignment, his department, his office location, all this data flows through to the customer's IT ticket portal system. Okay, now we're on to the IT team's perspective. The IT team is now informed of Bill's choice of a Windows laptop. The IT team sets up the asset, deploys it properly, and sends it to the correct office location ready for Bill's first day. So all of this is automated and processed without any manual prompts from the HR team or any emails sent back and forth. It's all through the integration itself. Of course, the
And
IT.
what are the processes you have seen from an integration standpoint?
Another integration, for example, would be the client maybe using Okta for their user provisioning. So the IT team would receive the new hire data from the integration. They can set up the appropriate user provisions. For example, in Bill's case, he needs a business email address. So once this business email address is created by the IT team and recorded in Okta, there is an automatic write back function from Okta into Dayforce to update the business email field in the Dayforce record. And it also updates the SSO Federation ID to allow Bill to utilize the SSO process when he first logs into his laptop. So that all of this is saved without manual intervention between the IT teams and HR teams manually copying and pasting this information between systems. This is an automatic seamless integration through the Integration Studio.
Okay, we do have a question from the members of the audience. What kind of impact would this create for the new starter experience?
So bringing this back to the new starter experience, beyond streamlining and any positives that the new joiner would have, just to have a company that has a seamless onboarding process. They're able to activate and provide the information they need for their employee record. The managers are involved through the onboarding portal. There are other automation implications. So not only are we reducing the manual workload within the HR teams, but there is an impact to the wider business processes when this data is synced to other systems. So this can be repeated for other software across a global adoption and a different type of strategy, for example, including data for finance ERPs, sending this back and forth for GL codes. So Dayforce really becomes your single source application at the start of your employees' digital footprint at your organization.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Vicky. That was really interesting. As we're coming up to the hour, I'd like to conclude today's session by saying, if you want more information about onboarding or you want to learn the configuration, number one, you can access the Dayforce Learning Center for bite-sized onboarding configuration videos. You can contact us for a demo of onboarding info. We can share with you the weekly topics, or if you need any support with your current existing onboarding solution, you can reach us at info@silvercloudhr.co.uk. And also you can contact us through our LinkedIn page and we would respond to you fairly quickly. Our next help desk session will be held shortly, so look out for the date in the future on our LinkedIn page. Thank you everyone for attending today and have a lovely day. Thank you, Vicky.
Thank you, everyone.